He, a cynical tycoon jaded by superficial beauty, organizes an event with 8 models. She, a humble single mom, works backstage. Amidst the chaos, Liv acts with intelligence. Dominic observes her. Against the splendor of the models, only the single mom attracts his eye. He falls for her essence and strength. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Liv Santos adjusted the small, stained mirror on the peeling wall of the room she shared with Peter, her 5-year-old son. The reflection showed the face of a 30-year-old woman whose features bore the mark of someone well acquainted with responsibility. Her brown eyes, though tired after yet another sleepless night, still held a spark of determination that even years of struggle hadn't extinguished. "Mommy, are you going to work again today?" Peter asked, sitting on the narrow bed, hugging a faded teddy bear that was his most prized possession. Liv smiled, that genuine smile she reserved only for her son. "Yes, sweetie, but today is special. Mommy's working at a very important event, and when I get back, maybe we can get that ice cream you want." The 2-room apartment in the Bronx, New York, was too small for the dreams Liv nurtured, but it was all they could afford on her freelance makeup artist's salary. The thin walls let in the noise of the neighbors, and the smell of frying from the deli downstairs rose through the poorly sealed windows. Even so, she made a point of keeping everything clean and organized, transforming that modest space into a cozy home. That Saturday morning, Liv carefully separated her makeup products into a well-worn black case. Each brush, each foundation, each lipstick represented a tool of the trade acquired through hard work. She had learned the profession on her own, watching videos online during the late nights when Peter was asleep, practicing on herself with the few cosmetics she could afford. The phone rang, interrupting her preparations. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly neighbor who watched Peter when Liv needed to work. "Liv, honey, I can't watch the boy today. My blood pressure's up again, and I need to go to the clinic." Liv's heart skipped a beat. Today's event was crucial for her. The Elegance modeling agency had hired her services for a charity fashion show at the most luxurious hotel in Manhattan, and the payment would be enough to pay 2 overdue installments of the rent. She couldn't cancel. "Okay, Mrs. Rodriguez, please take care of yourself." Liv hung up and took a deep breath, quickly thinking of a solution. She called her sister, Sarah, who lived on the other side of the city. "Liv, you know I'd help, but Michael has a fever, and I can't leave the house," Sarah explained, genuinely distressed. After 3 more unsuccessful calls, Liv looked at Peter, who was watching her with those big, understanding eyes that seemed to grasp far more than he should for his age. "Mom, can I go with you?" he asked, with the typical innocence of a child. The idea was unthinkable. A high-society Manhattan event was no place for a 5-year-old. But Liv's options were rapidly dwindling, and necessity outweighed social convenience. 2 hours later, Liv and Peter stepped off a crowded bus in the Upper East Side. The contrast was stark. The wide, tree-lined streets, the imposing facades of the buildings, the luxury cars parked on the spotless sidewalks. Everything seemed to belong to a world completely different from the one they lived in. The Royal Palace Hotel rose majestically on 5th Avenue, its mirrored glass windows reflecting the blue morning sky. Liv held Peter's hand tightly as they headed to the service entrance, as instructed by the event coordinator. "Wow, Mom, this building is bigger than our whole building," Peter exclaimed, impressed. "It is, honey. But remember what we talked about. You're going to stay quietly in a corner while Mommy works, okay?" In the hotel's basement, the movement was frenetic. Tall, slender models circulated in robes. Assistants scurried back and forth carrying dresses that cost more than Liv earned in an entire year, and the tension in the air was palpable. The Beauty That Transforms charity fashion show would be presented to a select audience, including businessmen, socialites, and, according to the rumors that ran through the halls, Dominic Thorne himself, the fashion tycoon whose company sponsored the event. Liv was directed to an improvised table in a corner of the collective dressing room. Her job would be to touch up the model's makeup between outfit changes. Peter settled silently in a chair next to her, flipping through a coloring book that Liv always carried in her bag for situations like this. The hours passed in a blur of pressed powder, lipstick, and eyeshadow. Liv worked with the precision of someone who had transformed each gesture into art, each brushstroke into silent poetry. Some models barely greeted her. Others didn't even look in her direction, treating her as part of the furniture. She was used to it. Her presence in that world was always discreet, almost invisible. That's when Valentina Rossini, one of the event's leading models, panicked just minutes before her second walk. Her makeup had completely smudged after an accident with a water bottle, and the time to fix it was practically non-existent. "There's no time! The show starts in 5 minutes!" she screamed on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Liv observed the situation with the calm of someone who had faced far worse crises than a smudge of mascara. She got up from her chair, approached Valentina, and in a soft but firm voice said, "I can help you. Sit here." In 4 precise minutes, with safe movements and impeccable technique, Liv completely rebuilt Valentina's look. The result was even more impressive than the original makeup. The model looked at herself in the mirror, incredulous. Backstage, during the bustle of the outfit change, Peter got up from the chair to stretch his legs. One of the assistants, running with a pile of dresses, tripped and dropped everything on the floor. The expensive fabrics spread across the concrete floor, some threatening to be stained irreparably. Before any adult could react, Peter quickly bent down and began to carefully collect the dresses, folding them as he had learned by watching his mother take care of her few clothes at home. His instinctive kindness and the care with which he handled each piece caught everyone's attention. Liv, who was finishing touching up another model, saw the scene and felt her chest swell with pride. There was her son, just 5 years old, demonstrating the same compassion and helpfulness that she tried to teach every day, even in an environment where they clearly didn't belong. In that moment, she understood that it didn't matter how many obstacles came her way. It didn't matter if money was always tight, if opportunities were rare, if the world around her insisted on reminding her of her place. She had raised a boy with a good heart, and that was worth more than any material wealth. Liv's resilience wasn't just in her ability to work tirelessly or to transform the little she had into something worthy. It was in the way she taught Peter to be kind in a world that was often cruel, how she maintained hope even when everything seemed impossible, and how she never allowed circumstances to define who she really was inside. Dominic Thorne adjusted the cuff of his Italian shirt while observing the frenetic activity backstage through the side entrance of the dressing room. At 40 years old, he had learned to read people as easily as he analyzed financial reports, and what he saw there was the usual spectacle: ambition disguised as elegance, self-interest masked as charm. The beauty that transforms fashion show was more of a social obligation than an event that really interested him. His presence there was due to a promise he made to his father before his passing, to be more present at the company's charitable events, to show a more human face to the public. Dominic kept his word, but without enthusiasm. "Mr. Thorne, the models would very much like to greet you before the next show," said Marcia, his personal assistant, consulting the tablet with the schedule. Dominic sighed discreetly. He knew exactly what that meant. Another round of calculated smiles, empty compliments, and not so subtle attempts to get his attention. In recent years, it had become a predictable game. Stunning women approached him with interest that never went beyond his bank account or the status his name provided. 5 minutes, he replied, checking the Rolex on his wrist. As he walked through the basement corridors of the hotel towards the main dressing room, Dominic reflected on how his life had become a sequence of empty encounters and superficial relationships. The last disappointment had been with Isabella, an international model who he discovered was selling information about his private life to gossip magazines. Since then, he had erected even higher walls around his heart. It was while turning a corner that the scene made him stop. A dark-haired child was kneeling on the floor, carefully collecting dresses that had been dropped. But that wasn't what caught Dominic's attention. It was the gentleness with which the boy handled each piece, as if they were fragile treasures, and the natural way he helped without expecting anything in return. "Peter, honey, you don't have to do that," said a female voice, soft but laced with a gentle maternal authority. Dominic looked up and saw a woman approaching the child. She wore simple clothes, dark jeans and a basic white t-shirt, but there was something in her posture that radiated a natural dignity. Her brown hair was tied back in a practical bun, and she carried a makeup case with the ease of someone who mastered her profession. "But she was in a hurry, Mom, and the dresses are pretty. I can't let them get dirty," the boy replied, continuing his task with the seriousness of an adult. The assistant who had dropped the dresses looked embarrassed at the situation, clearly unsure how to react to the child's spontaneous gesture. Other people began to approach, some whispering among themselves about the presence of a child backstage. Dominic remained there, observing the interaction as if watching a particularly fascinating play. The woman, who he deduced was the boy's mother, bent down beside her son and began to help him, not with haste or embarrassment, but with the same naturalness as him. "Thank you so much, sweetie," said the assistant, finally finding her voice. "You're very kind." Peter smiled, a pure smile that lit up the entire corridor. "My mom always says that we have to help when someone needs it." It was at that moment that the mother looked up and her eyes met Dominic's. For an instant, time seemed suspended. She had expressive brown eyes that reflected a life lived with intensity, but without bitterness. There was a depth there that he rarely saw in the people in his social circle. Liv felt her face flush slightly as she realized she was being watched by the most powerful man at the event. She recognized Dominic Thorne immediately. It was impossible not to know that face that graced business magazines and society columns. But there was something in his expression that surprised her. It wasn't the condescending or indifferent look she expected. It was genuine curiosity. "Sorry for the trouble," she said, getting up and holding Peter's hand. "We're already getting out of the way." "There's no trouble at all," replied Dominic, taking a few steps closer. His voice was softer than Liv had imagined. "On the contrary, it was very kind of him to help." Peter looked up, impressed with the height of the elegant man. "Do you work here too?" The innocent question drew a genuine smile from Dominic, the first real smile he had shown in weeks. "In a way, yes. And you? Do you also work here?" No. I just came with my mom because there was no one to stay with me today," Peter replied, with the typical honesty of children. "But I stay quiet and don't bother anyone." Dominic looked again at Liv, who seemed divided between pride in her son and embarrassment at the situation. There was something deeply touching in the way she instinctively protected him, even without knowing if he posed any threat. "Are you a makeup artist?" he asked, observing the case she was carrying. "Yes, sir. Liv Santos," she replied, extending her hand in a professional gesture. "I was hired for touch-ups during the event." When their hands touched in greeting, Dominic felt something he hadn't experienced in years, an electric connection, simple but powerful. Liv's hand was soft, but he could feel the marks of work, the texture of someone who knew effort. "Dominic Thorne," he introduced himself, noticing how her eyes widened slightly as she confirmed his identity. I know who you are," she murmured, clearly intimidated. At that moment, Marcia appeared in the corridor looking for Dominic. "Mr. Thorne, the models are waiting." Dominic looked at his assistant, then at Liv and Peter, and made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Marcia, cancel the meeting with the models. I have something more important to do." He turned to Liv, who looked at him confused. "Would you like to have coffee with me after the event? You and Peter, of course. I know a quiet place where he can play." The question caught Liv completely off guard. In her 30 years of life, she had never imagined that a man like Dominic Thorne could be interested in a conversation with her. The invitation seemed as unlikely as winning the lottery. I don't know if that's appropriate, sir," she replied hesitantly. "Dominic," he corrected gently, "and it would be an honor for me. It's been a long time since I've met people as authentic as you." Peter tugged at the hem of his mother's shirt. "Mom, he seems nice. And you said that after work we could have ice cream. Dominic smiled again, this time at Peter. I know a place that has the best chocolate ice cream in the city. Liv looked at her son, then at Dominic, and saw there something that experience had taught her to recognize: sincerity. For reasons she couldn't understand, that casual encounter had sparked the genuine interest of one of the most powerful men in the country. Okay, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. After the event, as Dominic walked away to fulfill his remaining commitments, Liv remained there for a few seconds, trying to process what had just happened. Her heart was beating fast, and she knew that nothing in her life would be the same after that encounter backstage in a world that had always seemed unattainable. The coffee shop that Dominic chose was on a quiet street in Greenwich Village, away from the hustle and bustle of the big shopping districts. It was a cozy place with rustic wooden tables and a small kids' area in the back, where Peter was immediately enchanted by a box of educational toys. Liv felt like an actress in a movie that wasn't hers. Sitting at the table with Dominic Thorne, she observed his every move with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. He had exchanged the impeccable suit for a more casual button-down shirt and a blazer, but still radiated a natural elegance that made Liv feel inadequate in her simple clothes. You don't need to be tense, Dominic said, noticing the stiffness in her posture. I'm not a business shark here. I'm just a man who was curious to get to know the woman who raised that extraordinary boy better. Peter was putting together a puzzle a few feet away from them, completely absorbed in the task, occasionally looking at his mother to make sure she was okay. He is my life, Liv said, relaxing slightly. Everything I do is thinking of him and his father. The question came softly, but Liv felt the familiar weight of the explanation that always embarrassed her. It chose not to be part of our story. He found out about the pregnancy and simply disappeared. It was better that way. Dominic nodded without judgment. It must have been difficult to raise Peter alone. It was, still is. Liv stirred the coffee she had ordered, the cheapest on the menu, even with Dominic insisting she choose anything. But Peter gives me strength I didn't even know I had. When I look at him, I know that every sacrifice is worth it. Sacrifices? Liv hesitated. It was strange to share her life with a stranger, especially someone from a world so different from hers. But there was something in the way Dominic listened to her, with genuine attention, without haste, that encouraged her to continue. I've worked as a freelance makeup artist since Peter was born. It's not a stable job, so there are months when it's hard to pay all the bills. We share a small apartment in the Bronx, and I never had time to think about myself, you know? My whole life revolves around giving him the best possible future. Dominic watched her with an intensity that made Liv wonder what he saw when he looked at her. Have you ever thought about expanding your business? Working in bigger salons, more frequent events? Of course I've thought about it. She laughed without humor. But in this industry, you need contacts, an impressive portfolio, expensive equipment. I do my best with what I have, but competing with makeup artists who work with celebrities, it's another level. What if I told you that you have enough talent for that other level? Liv looked at him surprised. What do you mean? I saw the work you did today with Valentina. In 4 minutes, you created a makeup look that many professionals would take 20 to do. And the result was impeccable. Liv's heart sped up. You, Dominic, were watching? I was backstage when it happened. I was impressed not only with your technique, but with your calm under pressure. It's a rare quality. Peter approached the table carrying the completed puzzle. Mom, look, I managed to put the whole castle together. That's beautiful, sweetie. Liv hugged her son, and Dominic watched the interaction with a genuine smile. Peter, can I ask you a question? Said Dominic, addressing the boy. What do you want to be when you grow up? Peter thought seriously before answering. I want to help my mom not be worried anymore. She sometimes stays up at night doing bills, and I pretend I'm sleeping, but I listen. So I want to have a job that helps her smile more. The answer left Liv emotional and Dominic visibly touched. There was a premature maturity in the child's words that revealed how much he understood the family's situation. "You're a very special boy, Peter," said Dominic, "and your mother is a very strong woman." When Peter returned to the toy area, Dominic leaned slightly forward. "Liv, I would like to make you a proposal." She looked at him cautiously. In her experience, proposals from rich men were rarely what they seemed to be. "My company is launching a new line of cosmetics next month. We need a makeup artist to work at the launch events, do demonstrations, train salespeople. It's a 6-month project with the possibility of extension." Liv felt breathless. I don't understand. Why me?" "Because you have something that cannot be taught in makeup schools: authenticity. When people look at you, they see truth. And our new line is exactly about that, enhancing natural beauty, not creating masks." "But I don't have experience in big companies." "You'll have all the necessary training. The salary would be enough for you and Peter to move to a better place, have financial stability." Liv leaned back in her chair, trying to process the information. It was too good to be true. "Dominic, I barely know you. Why would you do that for me?" He was silent for a moment, as if he was deciding how much to reveal. "Because it's been a long time since I've met someone who makes me want to be a better version of myself. And because Peter reminded me today of something I had forgotten, that genuine kindness still exists in this world." "Is that not charity?" she asked, her dignity wounded. "No, it's recognition of talent and a business opportunity. You would work hard, be evaluated by results. Nothing would be free." Liv looked at Peter, who was now drawing on a piece of paper that the waitress had given him. She thought about the sleepless nights, the overdue bills, the constant worry about the future. She also thought about the risk of getting involved with a world she didn't know, with a man who, however kind he seemed, represented everything that had always been out of her reach. "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course. Take your time." Dominic took a card out of his pocket. "My direct number is there. When you decide, call me." When they left the coffee shop, Peter was holding Dominic's hand naturally, telling him about his favorite drawings. Liv watched the interaction with a heavy heart. It had been a long time since Peter had a male figure around, and the ease with which he had connected with Dominic was both touching and worrying. When it was time to say goodbye, Dominic bent down to be at Peter's height. "It was a pleasure meeting you, champ. I hope we meet again soon." "Me too," Peter replied, hugging him spontaneously. During the bus ride back home, Peter didn't stop talking about the nice man he had met. Liv listened to him with half her attention, the other half lost in thoughts about the proposal she had received. That night, after Peter fell asleep, Liv stayed on the tiny balcony of the apartment, looking at Dominic's card under the yellowish light of the street lamp. For the first time in years, a door had opened in her life. The question was whether she would have the courage to cross it. Till 3 weeks had passed since Liv had accepted Dominic's proposal, and her life had changed almost beyond recognition. The new apartment in the Upper West Side was 3 times larger than the previous one. Peter had his own room decorated with a superhero theme, and she woke up every morning without the constant anguish of overdue bills. The work at Thorn Beauty had proven even more challenging and rewarding than Liv had imagined. In the early days, she felt like an intruder walking through the glass-walled corridors of the corporate building, but gradually she began to find her place. Her natural ability and her ability to connect with people quickly made her one of the most requested makeup artists on the team. Dominic maintained a respectful professional distance during work hours, but their conversations became increasingly frequent and personal. He had invited her for 2 more coffees, always including Peter, and Liv felt a connection growing between them that went far beyond professional gratitude. That Thursday afternoon, she was in the company's studio, finalizing a photo shoot for the new line's catalog, when her assistant, Camilla, approached with a worried expression. "Liv, there's a journalist here who wants to talk to you. She says it's about your hiring." Liv's stomach clenched. "What kind of journalist?" "Helen Marks from Social Scene magazine. She seems insistent." Liv knew the publication. It was one of the most widely read gossip magazines in New York high society. She took a deep breath and followed Camilla to the reception, where she found an elegant middle-aged woman, dressed impeccably and with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Liv Santos? Helen Marks, nice to meet you. The woman extended her hand with calculated cordiality. I'd like to talk to you about your sudden professional rise. I don't understand what you're talking about, replied Liv, instinctively cautious. Oh, honey, there's no need to be modest. An unknown makeup artist who in a matter of weeks gets a multi-million-dollar contract with Thorne Beauty. That's news, especially considering the rumors about your closeness with Mr. Dominic Thorne. Liv's blood ran cold. What rumors? Helen opened a folder and showed some grainy photos. Her and Dominic at the coffee shop, Peter playing while they talked, Dominic saying goodbye with a hug. You seem pretty close for a purely professional relationship, don't you think? And this little boy, he's your son, isn't he? Son of an unknown father, according to my research. My personal life is not public business, Liv said, trying to keep her voice steady. But when a single mother from the outskirts of the Bronx gets not only a prominent job, but also the personal attention of one of the most coveted bachelors in the country, well, that generates curiosity. The journalist leaned slightly forward, like a predator ready to pounce. Tell me, Liv, how exactly did you manage to catch Dominic Thorne's attention? Because, let's be honest, you didn't exactly meet in the same social circles. Liv felt anger rising in her throat, but before she could answer, Dominic's voice cut through the air. Ms. Marks, I believe you were not authorized to enter this building for an interview. Helen turned with a predatory smile. Mr. Thorne, what a wonderful coincidence. I was just talking to Miss Santos about the nature of you two. The nature of our relationship is strictly professional, said Dominic, positioning himself next to Liv. And now I ask you to leave. Of course. But before, can I ask if you usually take all your employees and their children to private coffees or hire makeup artists without references for executive positions? The silence that followed was deafening. Liv saw Dominic's jaw clench and knew that the situation had escalated to dangerous territory. My article comes out in the next issue, continued Helen, putting away the photos. It will be a beautiful story about how love can blossom in the most unexpected places, or about how certain people can use charm and circumstances to climb socially. After the journalist left, Liv and Dominic stood in silence at the reception. The gazes of the other employees seemed to burn on Liv's skin, and she could almost hear the whispers that would begin to spread. Dominic, she began. Let's go to my office, he interrupted gently. Once in his office, with the door closed, Liv collapsed into a chair. This is going to ruin everything, isn't it? Dominic sat behind the desk, running his hands through his hair. Helen Marks has a reputation for destroying reputations with half-truths and innuendo. So that's it? I'm going to lose my job? Not because of me, but he hesitated. Things could get complicated. The company has shareholders, board members. They don't like scandals. Liv felt tears burning in her eyes. I knew it was too good to be true. Women like me don't get these opportunities without someone questioning how. You earned this position on merit, Liv. Your work speaks for itself. But that doesn't matter, does it? What matters is what people will think, what they'll say. She stood up abruptly. Maybe it's better if I leave before this hurts you too. No, Dominic's voice was firm. We're not going to let a gossip columnist destroy what you've built here. But when Liv arrived home that night, she found Peter in the living room playing with Mrs. Davis, the babysitter they had hired. The elderly woman greeted her with a strained smile. Liv, dear, some neighbors mentioned that they saw you in some photos on the internet. They say you're dating a very rich man. Liv's heart plummeted. If it was already on the internet, it meant that Helen had leaked part of the story even before the official publication. That morning, after Peter fell asleep, Liv sat on the new sofa in the apartment that she might not be able to afford for much longer. She picked up the phone and typed a message to Sarah. I think I made a terrible mistake. The answer came minutes later. What happened? Liv typed and deleted several answers before finally writing, I believed I could have a different life. But some bridges are too big to cross. For the first time since she had met Dominic, Liv questioned whether she had made the right decision. The opportunity that seemed like a gift from fate now revealed itself as a gilded trap. And she feared that not only her career but also Peter's reputation could be destroyed by the spotlights of a world to which she should never have aspired to belong. The worst thing of all was that deep down, she knew that her feelings for Dominic had grown far beyond professional gratitude. And now those same feelings had become the weapon that could destroy everything she had achieved. Helen Marks' article came out on Friday morning with the sensationalist title, "Dominic Thorne's Cinderella Story, Fashion Tycoon Falls for Single Mom from the Wrong Side of the Tracks." The photos occupied 2 entire pages of the magazine, accompanied by speculations about the true motives of Liv's hiring and insinuations about the nature of her relationship with Dominic. Liv found out about the publication through Camilla, who arrived at the office with the magazine under her arm and a mortified expression. Liv's phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters wanting comments, curious acquaintances, even unknown numbers that somehow got her contact information. "Don't answer any more calls," advised Camilla. "The company's legal department is already taking care of the legal aspects." But the damage was done. During the morning, Liv noticed the glances of her colleagues, the whispers that ceased when she passed through the corridors. Some greeted her with forced cordiality, others simply ignored her. The work environment that had become her refuge now seemed hostile and suffocating. Round noon, Marcus Thorne, Dominic's uncle and the company's executive vice president, appeared in her office. He was a 60-year-old man, elegant and intimidating, known for his coldness in business and his fierce protection of the family's reputation. "Miss Santos, I need to talk to you," he said, closing the door behind him. Liv rose from her chair, her heart racing. "Mr. Thorne, sit down, please." His voice was polite but icy. "I imagine you are aware of the delicate situation we find ourselves in." "I am, and I want you to know that it was never my intention to cause problems for the company or for your family." Marcus sat down opposite her, studying her face with the precision of a surgeon. "I believe you, but your intentions, unfortunately, are irrelevant in the face of the facts. The company is receiving calls from concerned investors, and the board is questioning recent hiring decisions." Liv felt the ground open beneath her feet. "Are you firing me?" "I'm offering an alternative." Marcus opened a folder and took out some documents. A generous severance package, an impeccable letter of recommendation, and a confidentiality agreement about your relationship with my nephew. "What relationship?" "There is no relationship. Miss Santos, I have 40 years of experience in image crises. I know when a situation can be circumvented and when it needs to be resolved in a more definitive way." Liv looked at the papers, the small print seeming to dance before her eyes. "And if I don't sign? Then things will become much more difficult for everyone involved. For you, for Dominic, and especially for your son." The mention of Peter made Liv's blood run cold. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that scandals have a way of spreading, of affecting innocent people. Peter will grow up, go to school, make friends. It would be a shame if this story followed him for the rest of his life." It was a subtle but unmistakable threat. Liv felt a dull anger rising in her chest, but also a paralyzing fear for her son's safety and future. "I need to think," she managed to say. "Of course. You have until Monday." After Marcus left, Liv stayed alone in her office, looking out the window at the city that now seemed hostile and indifferent. She was seriously considering accepting the agreement when there was a knock on the door. "Come in," she said, expecting to see Camilla or some other colleague. To her surprise, who entered was Valentina Rossini, the model she had made up at the charity event. Valentina looked different, less imposing, more human. "Hi, Liv, can I sit down?" Liv nodded to the chair, curious about the reason for the visit. "I saw the magazine article," said Valentina bluntly. "It's a complete injustice." "Thank you, but no, listen. I've known Helen Marks for years. She did the same thing to me when I was starting out in my career." Valentina leaned forward. I was from a simple family from Queens, and when I started dating a famous photographer, she almost destroyed my reputation with insinuations about how I had got my first jobs. Liv looked at her with renewed attention. How did you overcome that? With the truth. And with allies, Valentina smiled. You may not know it, but many of us who work in this industry come from humble backgrounds. The difference is that some manage to hide it better than others. Why are you telling me this? Because I saw the work you did with me that day. Because I saw how Dominic looks at you. And it's not the look of someone only interested in a fling. Valentina paused. And because I know Marcus Thorne, and I know he probably came here today to pressure you to leave. Liv couldn't hide her surprise. He's done the same thing to other women who have gotten close to Dominic over the years. Marcus is obsessed with protecting the family image, especially after what happened with Dominic's father. What happened? Valentina hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. Dominic's father, Edward Thorne, was in love with a woman named Isabel. She was a teacher, came from a simple family. They met when he was starting the company, before all the wealth. Liv leaned forward, intrigued. Marcus and the rest of the family did everything to separate them. They said she was a gold digger, that she was going to hurt the business. Edward gave in to the pressure and married a suitable woman, Dominic's mother. But he never forgot Isabel. How do you know this? Because Isabel was my grandmother. Valentina's revelation fell like a bomb. She died when I was a teenager, but she always told me that story. She always said that true love shouldn't be sacrificed for social conveniences. Liv felt a chill down her spine. Does Dominic know this? No, no one in the family knows who I really am. Use my ex-husband's last name. Valentina stood up. But I thought you should know that this family resistance isn't about you specifically. It's about a pattern they've repeated for decades. Why are you helping me? Valentina smiled sadly. Because my grandmother spent her whole life regretting not fighting for her love. And because I believe that sometimes fate gives us a second chance to right the wrongs of the past. After Valentina left, Liv was lost in thought. The story she had just heard cast a completely new light on the situation. It wasn't just about her and Dominic. It was about a cycle of prejudice and control that the Thorne family had perpetuated for generations. For the first time since the publication of the article, Liv felt that maybe there was a way to fight. Not just for her job or her reputation, but for something bigger. For the right to love and be loved, regardless of her social background. She picked up the phone and typed a message to Dominic. I need to talk to you. It's about your father and about the truth that your family doesn't want you to know. Dominic arrived at Liv's apartment on Saturday night with a somber expression that she had never seen before. He had spent the last 24 hours processing the revelation about his father and Isabel, confronting Marcus about the details that the family had hidden from him for decades. It's true, he said as soon as Liv opened the door. Everything Valentina told you. My father loved Isabel, and the family kept her away from him. Peter was sleeping, so they sat in the living room in a whispered conversation. Dominic looked like a man who had discovered that his entire life had been built on lies. I found the letters he wrote to her, continued Dominic, his voice full of pain. Boxes of them kept in his private office. He never stopped loving her, Liv, even married to my mother, even building an empire. He never forgot Isabel. Liv held his hand. I'm so sorry. It must be terrible to find that out. The worst thing is that I understand now why he always seemed distant. Why even with all the success, he never seemed really happy. Dominic looked at her with anguish-filled eyes. And I'm repeating the same story, aren't I? What do you mean? Marcus contacted me today. He said that if I don't stay away from you, he's going to call an emergency board meeting to question my leadership ability. He's going to use our relationship as evidence that I'm making emotional decisions that hurt the company. Liv felt her stomach clench. And what did you say? That he can do whatever he wants. That I'm not going to abandon you like my father abandoned Isabel. The statement should have filled Liv with joy, but instead she felt an overwhelming weight of responsibility. Dominic, you can't sacrifice everything you've built for me. It's not for you, it's for us. For Peter, for a chance to have the life my father never had the courage to live. But before Liv could answer, her phone rang. It was Sarah, her sister, and there was panic in her voice. Liv, you need to come here now. It's about Peter. Liv's blood ran cold. What happened? He's here with me. No, it's not that. It's... Reporters came to Michael's school today asking about you, about Peter. They know where he studies, Liv. And it's not just reporters. There are people making horrible comments on the internet about you, about him being the son of an unknown father. Liv hung up the phone with trembling hands. Dominic watched her with growing concern.
What was it?
They got to Peter, the reporters, the people. They're harassing my son. Dominic stood up immediately. I'm going to get private security for you. I'm going to... No. Liv's voice came out louder than she intended, and she looked quickly at Peter's room to make sure she hadn't woken him up. No, Dominic. You don't understand. This is exactly what I feared. Liv, I can protect you. For the rest of our lives? Is Peter going to grow up always looking over his shoulder, always wondering what people are saying about him, about his mother? Tears began to roll down her face. He's 5 years old, Dominic. 5 years old, and he's already being dragged into a scandal he doesn't even understand. Dominic tried to approach her, but Liv backed away. You said you're not going to abandon me like your father abandoned Isabel. But what if I abandon you? What if I choose to leave before this destroys Peter? Don't say that. Look at me, Dominic. Really look at me. Liv opened her arms, showing the modest apartment, her simple clothes, the reality of who she was. I'm a single mother from the Bronx. I've been working since I was 15 to survive. I've never been to a theater. I've never traveled out of state. I've never had a dress that cost more than a minimum wage paycheck. And do I care about that? You should. Because your world is going to destroy me, Dominic. And worse, it's going to destroy my son. She sat on the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Maybe Marcus is right. Maybe some distances are too big to be crossed. Dominic knelt in front of her. Liv, look at me. When she raised her face, he saw there a pain that went far beyond fear. It was the desperation of a mother who saw her son being dragged into a battle he hadn't chosen. I love you, said Dominic simply. I love you. I love Peter. I love the life we could have together. But I can't use Peter as a gamble in a relationship that might not work out. He didn't ask to be on magazine covers, to have his childhood exposed, to carry the weight of being the son of the woman who conquered Dominic Thorne. Dominic felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath his feet. So that's it? You're going to give up on us? Liv closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was a painful resolution there. I'm going to accept Marcus's offer. The agreement, the severance, everything. And I'm leaving New York with Peter. Where to? To somewhere where we can start over. Where he can grow up without carrying this story. Dominic stood up, running his hands through his hair in despair. You're letting them win. Exactly like my father did. No, Dominic. I'm protecting my son. It's different. It's the same thing. It's fear disguised as protection. The accusation hit Liv like a punch in the stomach because there was truth in it that she didn't want to admit. Yes, she was afraid. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid that Dominic would get tired of her. Afraid that Peter would pay the price for her mistakes. Maybe it is fear, she admitted, her voice breaking. But it's also love. And sometimes loving means knowing when to let go. That night, after Dominic left, not with anger, but with a deep sadness that cut Liv's heart, she sat next to Peter's bed, watching her son sleep. He seemed so small, so innocent, oblivious to the storm that was forming around his life. For the first time since she had met Dominic, Liv allowed herself to dream about what it would be like if she was someone else. If she had been born into a rich family, if she had studied at expensive schools, if her story were different. But then Peter stirred in his sleep, murmured, "Mommy," softly, and she remembered that she wouldn't change anything that had brought her to him. On Sunday morning, Liv woke up with the painful certainty. On Monday, she would sign Marcus's agreement and begin to plan her departure from New York. She would protect Peter in the only way she knew how, by removing him completely from that world that rejected them. It was the hardest thing she had ever done in her life, but also the one that seemed most necessary, even if it meant giving up the only man she had ever truly loved. On Monday morning, Liv woke up with eyes swollen from crying so much during the night. Peter was already awake, sitting on the bed, watching her with that premature wisdom that children develop when they realize that something is wrong in the adult world. "Mom, are you sad because of the nice man?" he asked, reaching out to hug her. Peter's simple question was like a ray of clarity cutting through the fog of self-pity in which Liv had lost herself. She looked at her son, his bright eyes, his genuine concern, his infinite ability to love, and something inside her transformed. "Peter, what would you do if someone said you couldn't play with your friends because your family is different?" Peter thought seriously before answering. "I would show them that being different isn't bad. And if they were still mean, I would play with friends who like me the way I am." Her son's innocent wisdom hit Liv like an awakening. Throughout her life, she had accepted the place that society imposed on her, had internalized the belief that certain opportunities were not for people like her. But Peter didn't have those limits. He saw the world as a place where everyone deserved happiness and respect. In that moment, Liv understood that running away wasn't protecting Peter. It was teaching him that when the world is unfair, the answer is to hide. It was perpetuating the same cycle of submission that had defined her own life. "Mom is going to work now, sweetie. But today is going to be a special day." Instead of going straight to Marcus's office to sign the agreement, Liv made a stop she hadn't planned. She went to the public library and spent 2 hours researching everything she could find about Helen Marks and her journalistic practices. What she discovered encouraged her. Helen had a history of lawsuits for defamation, several of which she had lost. More importantly, Liv found old interviews where other victims of the journalist told how they had managed to reverse the damage caused by her sensationalist articles. Armed with this information, Liv arrived at Thorn Beauty with a determination that surprised even herself. Instead of meeting with Marcus, she went first to the company's legal department. "Dr. Evans, I need to talk to you about my legal rights," she said to the company's chief lawyer. "Of course, Liv. Is it about the agreement that Mr. Thorn proposed?" "It's about much more than that." Liv told the lawyer everything: Marcus's pressure, the veiled threats about Peter, the story of Isabel and Edward Thorn. Dr. Evans listened to her with growing attention, occasionally taking notes. "Liv, are you aware that you have labor rights that cannot be violated by family pressure, and that the threats that Marcus made can be considered harassment?" "I am now." More importantly, you have a powerful tool against Helen Marks. Her article contains several factual inaccuracies and insinuations that can be challenged in court. For the first time in days, Liv felt that she had options beyond running or submitting. Her next stop was Valentina's office. The model was preparing for a photo shoot when Liv knocked on the door. "I need your help," said Liv without preamble. "Do you know other cases like mine? Other people that Helen Marks attacked?" Valentina smiled. "I was waiting for you to ask that." Valentina revealed that there was an informal network of people, models, actresses, businessmen, who had been victims of Helen's tactics over the years. Many had remained silent out of fear, but some were willing to speak out if there was an opportunity to expose the journalist's unethical methods. "There's something else," said Valentina. "Helen has a weakness. She is obsessed with exclusivity. If you offered her an even better story, one that would be more successful than the original, what kind of story? The truth about Edward Thorn and Isabel, the real story of how Marcus and the family destroyed the great love of the company founder's life. With documents, letters, evidence." Valentina leaned forward. "Imagine the scandal, the romantic tragedy that the Thorn family has hidden for decades." The idea was audacious and risky, but Liv realized it could work. If Helen had a more sensational story to tell, she would lose interest in the first one. Her last stop before the final confrontation was Dominic's office. She knocked on the door and entered without waiting for an answer. Dominic was standing by the window, looking out at the city. When he turned and saw her, his expression mixed surprise and a poorly disguised pain. "I thought you were going to sign the agreement today," he said. "I am, but not the agreement that Marcus wants." Liv approached him. "I'm going to propose a different agreement. One where I stay, where I fight, where I show Peter that sometimes it's worth facing the world when you're defending something true." Dominic studied her carefully. "What changed?" "You said that I was letting fear disguised as protection guide my decisions." "You were right." Liv took a deep breath. "But you also said you love me. Is that still true?" "Of course it's true. Then I need you to trust me. What I'm going to do today might seem like a betrayal at first, but it's the only way to end this cycle once and for all." Dominic frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm going to tell Helen Marks the real story about your father and Isabel. I'm going to give her access to the letters, to the documents, to everything. And I'm going to do it publicly, in front of Marcus and the board." The shock on Dominic's face was evident. "Liv, that's going to destroy the family's reputation." "No, Dominic. It's going to free you from it." Liv held his hands. "Your father spent his whole life carrying the weight of a choice he was forced to make. Marcus uses the fear of scandal to control you in the same way he controlled your father. It's time to show that love isn't a weakness to be hidden, but a strength worth defending." Dominic was silent for a long moment, processing the implications of what she was proposing. "And if it goes wrong? What if Marcus manages to get me out of the company?" Liv smiled, and for the first time in days, there was true hope in her eyes. "Then we'll build something new, together, but at least we'll have tried to live our truth instead of living in fear." At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Liv was in the boardroom, waiting for Marcus to arrive with the agreement. But she wasn't alone. Dr. Evans was by her side, as was Valentina. And on the table, instead of the resignation papers, there was a folder with copies of Edward Thorne's letters and a completely different proposal. The war was about to begin, but this time, Liv would fight on her own terms. Marcus Thorne entered the boardroom with the confidence of someone who was used to controlling every situation. He brought with him 3 lawyers and the agreement he expected Liv to sign without question. His expression changed when he saw the configuration of the table. Liv, accompanied by the company's lawyer, Valentina next to them, and a folder of documents he didn't recognize. "Ms. Santos, I hope you're here to formalize our conversation from Friday," said Marcus, sitting at the head of the table. "I'm here to formalize something, yes," replied Liv, her voice firm. "But not what you imagine." Dominic entered the room at that moment, and Liv saw on his face a mixture of support and apprehension. He sat down next to Marcus, but his eyes remained fixed on her. "Before we proceed," said Liv, "I would like to present some information that I consider relevant to everyone present." She opened the folder and took out a yellowed photocopy of a handwritten letter. "This is a letter that Edward Thorne wrote to Isabel Santos in 1985. Isabel Santos was my maternal grandmother." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus paled visibly, while Dominic leaned forward incredulous. "That's right," continued Liv. "I'm the granddaughter of the woman that Edward Thorne loved and was forced to abandon due to family pressure. The woman whose letters he kept for decades, whose memory haunted him until the end of his life." Valentina stood up. "And I am Isabel's great-granddaughter. Valentina Rossini is my stage name, but my real name is Valentina Santos Silva." Marcus tried to compose himself. This changes nothing. It has no relevance to the current situation." "It has all the relevance," said Dr. Evans, taking control of the conversation. "Because it demonstrates a pattern of discriminatory behavior by the Thorne family against employees from humble backgrounds, especially women. A pattern that can be considered systemic harassment." Liv stood up, feeling a strength she had never experienced before. "Mr. Thorne, for 40 years, you have used the fear of scandal to control the personal decisions of your family. You made Edward give up the love of his life. You tried to make Dominic repeat the same mistake. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Liv took a digital recording out of the folder. This is a recording of our conversation from Friday, where you threatened me in veiled terms and tried to blackmail me using my son. Marcus stood up abruptly. That's absurd. It would be a shame if this story followed Peter for the rest of his life. Liv quoted his exact words. I have witnesses and documentation of everything. Dominic looked at his uncle with an expression of growing horror. Marcus, did you really threaten a child? I was protecting the family. Protecting you. You were repeating the same mistakes that destroyed my father's happiness. Dominic stood up, his voice laden with decades of repressed frustration. How many times, Marcus? How many women have you kept away from me over the years? How many opportunities for happiness have you sabotaged in the name of family protection? At that moment, the door opened and Helen Marks entered, accompanied by a photographer. Liv had counted on the journalist's obsessive punctuality. Ms. Marks, said Liv calmly, I'm glad you arrived. I have a much better story for you than the one you published last week. Helen stopped, confused. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the real Thorne love story, about how Edward Thorne, founder of a fashion empire, was forced by his family to abandon the great love of his life, about how that woman was my grandmother, and about how her great-granddaughter, Valentina Rossini, has been working in the company for years without anyone knowing her true identity. Helen's eyes gleamed with the realization that she had stumbled upon a story much bigger than she had imagined. Liv continued, but the story doesn't stop there. It also tells how Marcus Thorne, driven by the same class prejudices that destroyed his brother's happiness, tried to repeat the pattern with me. How he threatened me and tried to blackmail me into staying away from Dominic. Do you have proof of this? Asked Helen, already recording. I do. Liv looked directly at Marcus. And I have more. I have a network of people who have been victims of similar practices over the years. People willing to talk about how the Thorne family uses intimidation to control the personal relationships of its members. Marcus was visibly desperate. You can't do this. This will destroy the company, destroy the family. No, said Dominic, approaching Liv. This will free our family from the prison of prejudices that you've built around us. He held Liv's hand and looked directly into Helen's cameras. My name is Dominic Thorne, and I am in love with Liv Santos. She is an extraordinary woman, a dedicated mother, a talented professional. And if my family can't accept that, then it's the family that needs to change, not my heart. Liv felt her eyes fill with tears. Dominic, I'm not finished. He turned to her, completely ignoring the cameras and the lawyers. Liv Santos, you taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to do what's right even when you're afraid. You showed me that true love is worth any fight. He knelt right there in front of everyone and took a small velvet box out of his pocket. Marry me. Not because it's convenient or appropriate, but because you are the person with whom I want to build a family based on love and truth, not on fear and prejudice. The silence in the room was total. Liv looked at Dominic, then at the simple but beautiful ring in the box, then at all the people around them who represented a world that had for so long rejected her. Yes, she whispered, then repeated louder, yes. When Dominic slid the ring on her finger and kissed her, the camera flashes went off, but for the first time, Liv didn't care. She was writing her own story on her own terms. 6 months later, Liv and Dominic were married in a simple ceremony on the beach, with Peter as the ring bearer and Valentina as the maid of honor. Marcus had resigned from his positions in the company after the recording scandal. But ironically, the revelation of the story of Edward and Isabel had humanized the Thorne brand, connecting it with values of true love and authenticity. Helen Marks won a journalism award for the series of reports on class prejudice in the corporate world. And Liv became not only Dominic's wife, but creative director of Thorn Beauty, developing a line of cosmetics aimed at real women from all social classes. Peter grew up in a home filled with love, with a stepfather who officially adopted him and taught him that true nobility doesn't come from the last name but from the character. And so, the single mother from the Bronx who dared to dream of a better life discovered that sometimes fairy tales do exist. Not because the princes save the princesses, but because two courageous people decide to save each other, building together a kingdom based on true love. Dear listeners, we hope that Liv and Dominic's journey has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. This story of courage, love, and overcoming reminds us that we all deserve to fight for happiness, regardless of our background. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special selection of equally inspiring stories about people who dared to defy fate. You can find them by clicking on the link here. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Each gesture of yours motivates us to continue bringing stories that celebrate the strength of the human heart. Every day, we explore the beauty and complexity of life through unique narratives. See you in the next episodes, and we look forward to your comments on what touched you most in Liv's story.